Apex Online Racing is sponsored by Elgato, who created this lovely Stream Deck. For more information about the Stream Deck, the link is in the description below.
Good evening everybody and welcome to round number 5 of AOR PS4 F1 Season 17 for the British Grand Prix, a race that marks the halfway point actually of this abridged 10 race season. I'm Ali Kid and I will be alone in the commentary box this evening as Gaming Alamonda is away enjoying the Spanish Grand Prix weekend, and I'll do as best I can to bring you all of the action from this evening's race. So coming to this one, it is the Renault driver Dominic Hoffmann who holds a slender championship advantage of 7 points over the McLaren of VGI and Lucas, one of our title contenders from last season, and that is a battle that looks pretty much set to rage right until the very end of this season. A further 21 points back is the other Renault of Jarno Opmeer, who has dropped back slightly from the top 2 following a 9th place finish last time out at the Austrian Grand Prix. The next round in this enthralling championship though takes us to the wonderful, incredible Silverstone circuit, one of the greatest tracks ever to grace the Formula 1 calendar, and it is the site of some of the most dramatic moments in the history of this league. If you remember season 13 and that fated final lap, you may or may not remember what I am talking about. But each one of these 18 corners is steeped in its own little bit of history, and I'm sure there is plenty more to be made tonight. So you can see the tyres available for us this evening are the soft, the medium and the hard compound tyre. We're expecting almost everybody to do a one-stop and go from the softs to the mediums, because the hards, the blue wall tyre in 2018 never really got used. I think it was only Nico Hülkenberg who used it in the actual race, and we imagine it will probably be pretty much the same here today. You can see the current track records, 26.1, that is likely to get beaten in qualifying. We're expecting a low 25 probably. We are very late into the game cycle here, so everybody is going to be going very, very fast on the fastest possible compound of tyre, you would imagine anyway. The strategy though does look pretty clear-cut whatever tyre you go for in qualifying. There you can see the track with 2 DRS zones, 2 major overtaking opportunities down into Stowe and into Brooklands as well, but that's not it. You can overtake pretty much anywhere on this track, and you can see here Bresner and Sorensen fighting it out in season 15 this was, into the Vale chicane, which is one of the slightly more unorthodox places to go for a move, but honestly you could overtake anywhere around this track and you can never quite expect what's going to happen. So in qualifying then, we have just got 15 minutes remaining in this session and nobody has set a lap time yet. It will be interesting actually in this qualifying session because we are likely to get people running throughout the entire session and not just wasting time and procrastinating almost to go for a run, almost like one-shot qualifying at the end of the session, because we're expecting almost everyone to be on the softs, which theoretically should make a much better qualifying session to watch. Anyway, good evening to all of you. I hope you're all having a fine Sunday evening. It's actually very nice to be back. It's been a little while since I've been in the commentary box for AOR, and it's a very, very nice feeling to have this fixture back on my Sunday evening routine. And what a track to be back at as well. This is probably my favourite track on the entire calendar as we watch Jim Michael in the Williams, who hasn't actually had quite as good a start to the season as you might have expected him to have, set the fastest time so far. The Williams team has had a little bit of a torrid time so far. Jim Roy is well down in 9th place in the championship as we watch Lee Finley try and pick up a little bit of slipstream down the back straight. The Haas team actually has been a bit of quite a revelation so far this season. Lee Finlay is doing very well in the championship considering he is a debutant, and I believe as well he is on the pad, which is a very unusual thing to say. I think Curly Whirly was the last man we had drive on the pad as he gets all out of shape out of the final chicane and up to the line. I'm sure that is not quite the lap time that he was looking for, but there you can see the provisional grid is shaking out slightly as Danny MG, our winner last time out, our surprise winner you might say, sticks it on provisional pole in that Mercedes with a 25.6, which is a very good lap time at this stage of the qualifying session. As I say, that VGI Lucas just goes and smashes it out of the park, as he tends to do The man is absolutely lethal in these qualifying sessions, as Tyrrell Schnitzel is actually not on a lap. He's on medium tyres. That's a bit interesting. I wasn't quite expecting that one. Let's go on board with Jarno, the other Renault, who's actually very low on fuel. He is yet to set a lap time in this session. He's picking up a very nice tow from the Ferrari of Ruben as he goes into Stowe, running slightly wide. I think he's just about got away with that one. Then into the final chicane. Let's see if he takes it a little bit tighter than Lee Findlay managed, and that looks to me pretty much inch perfect. So around the final corner and up to the line, that second Renault driver goes P2 with a 25.4. Not quite on the pace of that McLaren, but that is, well, a very, very fast early benchmark from both of those two drivers, and I imagine we probably won't be going much faster than that, even right at the very end of this session. I think that might be almost near the absolute limit. We're expecting, as I mentioned, pole to be around the low 25 mark, and to be already there 12 minutes into this session is, well, really quite something. Let us know in the chat who your bet is for pole position. I think if it were me, I'd probably be going for VGI Lucas, seeing as he... well, actually, that's an interesting call. Or one of the two Renaults. The two Renaults have been lightning fast in qualifying thus far this season, so I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those two sticking on pole. I think Tyrrell Schnitzel, otherwise known as Dominic Hoffman, again, has probably surprised a few people this season. We expected him to be fast. We saw him in season 16. We knew that he was fast. On his day, he had unbelievable pace, but he wasn't able to produce that consistently. And since he's been back, he has just blown everybody out of the water, winning the first two races as the Renault domination seemed like it was going to be never-ending early on in the season. But he's been... yeah, quite a revelation since he came back, and going into the second half of the season, you would say he probably is the favourite for this title, which is a big thing to say after only 4 races in a season. But when it's only 10 races long, every race matters, and he's put himself in the perfect position to be able to fight for the title come the very end of this season. I look forward to seeing if he can keep it going all season as well, because as I mentioned, that was his problem in... that was his problem in season 16. Okay, was not quite expecting that. Do excuse me while we get back into the session, but I'll just continue my point. I think Dominic Hoffman probably, going into the second half of the season, you would have to say would be most people's favourites. Obviously it's very, very close, but when you lead the championship and you've been so impressive up to this point, I think being the favourite is probably what you've got to expect, really. But VGI Lucas has also been incredibly strong, and he is out for blood, I would imagine. The way he was robbed, where he was robbed of the title, well, not robbed of the title even, robbed of a title challenge potentially at the Japanese Grand Prix last season. He had a nightmarish sequence of races, if you think back to, well, the biggest one being Japan, where he was taken out of the race by a sleepy pit crew, which is not something I thought I'd be saying at the start of the season, and then later on, the race after that at the USA, he was taken out at the first corner, and that was, well, that put pay to his title hopes in the end, which was extremely unfortunate because neither incident really looked like it was his fault, and it was just very, very bad luck on his part. So it would be very nice to see him get back fighting at the front and see if he can make amends for the misfortune that befell him last season, as everybody now is out winding up for their second runs in this session, and it looks like we are going to get running throughout the entire session, which is very nice to see. Jim Michael has just started his lap, so let's go with the Williams driver, our reigning champion from last season, who was so impressive all season. He always had the pace when it really mattered. This season hasn't quite clicked for Jim Michael as of yet, but given the pedigree of the driver he has now become, you would imagine that's not going to stay the same for very long. I think he probably didn't quite account for the pace of both Lucas and of Dominic Hoffman on their returns to the league, and how fast they would be, really. I don't think anybody really accounted for that, and it might have been for these two Williams drivers who were so successful in the championship last season. That might well have been a little bit of a shock to the system, as Roy's actually overtaken his teammate on this lap, so we're right on board with him. As Michael appears to... actually, no, Michael's giving him slipstream. Wow, okay, they're being very coordinated. We saw the Red Bull team do that a couple of times last season with both Tim and Roy, and it looks like Michael and Roy are operating the same tactics here, and this time it's going to be Michael who benefits, and I assume he's going to give... oh, he's going to return the favour even on the next lap. So let's see what Michael can do with that slipstream down the back straight. You would imagine that's going to help him a lot, and it does. It puts him up into P2, Still though, not enough to challenge Lucas's first lap, which I think just shows you how fast that lap was from the McLaren driver. So while I've got a chance, let's ride on board with the McLaren for an entire lap of this Silverstone circuit. So through turn 1, Abbey completely flat out, leaving in 7th gear actually, which is interesting, before going down into Village, and again, not even shifting up to 8th. 4th gear, wow, that's very interesting. I was not expecting that whatsoever. And then through the loop, slightly wide, he doesn't really pick up an apex, but it's not too much of a problem around that corner. You can still get decent drive out onto the Wellington straight, and that is what really matters on the run down towards Brooklands. Again, opting not to use 8th gear, braking just before the 50-meter board, and momentarily dropping down to 3rd just to get that little bit of extra bite to hit the apex. And then Lovefield's a very odd corner. It's almost like a double apex, which is executed beautifully by VGI Lucas there, and it looks like this lap for him is coming together pretty well. So let's see what he can do through Cops. Again, that looked pretty nice, right on the limit, slightly wide of the apex, and then through one of the greatest sequences of corners anywhere in the world, Maggots and Beckett, and that's not quite perfect. It's almost there, we'll give him that. Activating the DRS out onto the hanger straight, and he's just down on his best lap time. If he can nail this final sector, though, there's still time for him to find. He's already gone very, very fast in this session. He's still got plenty of time left to find even more time. Let's see what he can do, though, into the final chicane. Opting for 3rd gear, that's very nice. Clipping the apex beautifully, and the second one as well. Using up all the track on the exit. And then through Club up to the line. Is it going to be an improvement? Yes, it is. It's a 25-2. What a lap. And we still have 6 minutes remaining in this session for him to find even more time. That is looking very ominous for the rest of the field, as Jarno doesn't improve. Let's go and find Schnitzel, and he doesn't improve either. So at the moment, it is VGI Lucas on provisional pole ahead of Michael in 2nd, Jarno Ottmar in 3rd, and then a surprise really of the Sauber, Hugo up in P4 ahead of our championship leader in P5. Danny as well bailing out and coming into the pits, as is the car ahead of him, who made a very late choice to come into the pits. So in a finely poised qualifying session then, with just over 5 minutes remaining. Let's see how this one shapes out then. We've already had some unbelievably fast times, and I imagine they will only get faster as we head towards the end of this session, as everybody is just rolling round, or rolling off the track in Davidos's case, preparing for their final runs in this qualifying session. So 5.5 minutes remaining then, and I would imagine whatever happens this evening, we will certainly have a more entertaining race than what we all watched earlier with the real life F1 Spanish Grand Prix, which I have to say was not the most enthralling race I've ever watched. Still, though, not every race can be as exciting as it is in AOR. I'm sure we will get more interesting races towards the end of the season. And it looked like, actually, at the start of this one, Renault in this league might be matching the dominance of Mercedes in real life, as they started with a couple of consecutive 1-2s and a lot of podium finishes and taking up a fair share of the points as well. But that hasn't quite shaped out as we move later on into the season. China and Austria were a slightly different story, actually. And I wonder if the Renaults will be able to reassert their dominance at round number 5 after that strong start they showed in first 2 rounds of the season, as Michael is back out on track very early. He always tends to do this, does Michael? I think it's similar to what I used to do when I used to league race. In qualifying, you always leave yourself a little bit of extra margin on your final run. So although you don't get to make the most of the track when it's at its very fastest, right at the very end of the session, if you make a mistake on your first run, you have time to back out of it and then go again for a second lap on the same set of tyres if you in the end don't produce on your first run on that set of tyres. So let's see what Michael will do then. The first man of the real contenders for pole to go for his final run in this session. The lap times have already been crazy fast. We're already down at a 25-2 with just under 4 minutes remaining of the session. That is one incredible benchmark to beat. Let's see if our reigning champion can do anything about trying to move ahead of VGI Lucas then. So, starting his final lap of the session, Jim Michael crosses the line in that Williams, then into turn 1. That's again slightly wide of the apex and dips a wheel off the track on the exit. That is not an ideal line. And then into Village using 2nd gear. We saw Lucas use 4th, so very, very different styles. And then into the loop, again slightly wide of the apex, but taking a very, very wide line on the entry, maximising his exit as well as possible. And then down the Wellington straight, looking for your braking point into Brooklands. Again, just before the 50 metre border, using up all the track and the curve. And again, that's slightly wide of the apex. He takes such a wide line on entry, almost every single corner. And again, through Luffield, slightly wide of the apex, again on the exit, but that's not too important an apex. You still get decent drive through Woodcut and towards Copse. As he moves to the inside and then back to the outside to try and open up Copse corner as much as possible, throwing it in 7th gear, slightly wide again. The lap's looking good, but not inch perfect. So we'll see what he can do through Maggots and Beckett's and Chapel, slightly wide again. The car looks very uneasy, very on edge, and he's going to get slipstream once again from his teammate. This could be the make or break moment in his lap. So with the slipstream from his teammate, everything is set up here for Michael to have a shot at pole position. That is beautifully done from the Williams team. Michael, though, slightly wide at start. Again, though, he's carried huge amounts of speed through the corner and then down into the final chicane. The entire lap is riding on this, then using 2nd gear to clip the apex as well as possible, opening up the second part as much as he can, then through the final corner and up to the line. What is it for Michael? It is provisional pole position with a 25-1. What a lap that is. Can the others do anything about that whatsoever? Well, let's wait and find out. Michael is not going to go for another lap, so the other drivers in this league have 2 minutes to try and match what is probably one of the fastest laps you will see this evening around this Silverstone circuit. So let's ride on board with the man whose provisional pole position has just been snatched away from him, Vijay Lucas. Can he challenge his title rival from season 16? He's now the one who's in pole position to fight for the title this season. Can he take it to DRS Schnitzel? He needs to make the most of this perceived lack of pace from the Renault team as they're down in P3 and 5, which is a little lower than we would have expected them to be. So with 1 minute 30 remaining in this session, Vijay Lucas flies through turn 1, again using 4th gear. For turn 3, that's a very strange driving style. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else take that. And then trying to get the power down as best he can down the Wellington straight, clipping the apex very nicely, using up all of the track and activating DRS as soon as possible before opening up Brooklands as much as possible. He's got a bit of traffic in front of him that's slightly distracting as well with the Haas car offline. It doesn't take much to put you off your braking point, just slightly, and that can be enough. But he's had a big old drift out of Luffield as well. That'll compromise him all the way through Woodcut and towards Copse, as well as there's another Haas in the way. This one gets out of the way a little more compliantly and then just about flat out through Copse. There was a slight lift there, and then trying to go through Maggots, Beckett and Chapel, again slightly wide of the apex. Everybody's car looks very lively through these corners. Very difficult to control, but that's a perfect run from Lucas. He, though, will not have the benefit of the slipstream through the final sector, and that could be the deciding factor in this battle for pole. Schnitzel has gone P3, and surely that will be it for his qualifying session. He will not be able to match Lucas and Michael. Lucas knows what time he's got to match. You can see Michael's 25-1. Can he get anywhere near that? He's already on a 25-2, and there's a Renault of Jarno going very slowly through the final chicane. That is going to be incredibly distracting for the McLaren driver, and he cannot match Michael. And he's backed out of it, so it will be P2 at best then for the McLaren of Vijay Lucas. Roy's gone P5, Ruben's gone P4. Let's see what Jarno can do. Oh, he's got so much traffic in front of him going through Sector 1, through the loop. Let's see if he can get the traction down nicely. He's got almost like a moving roadblock of that Ferrari directly in front of him. He will, though, pick up a beautiful slipstream. Look at that. Lucas retires from the session. He is resigned to his fate now. Oh, there's Sauber getting offline as well. And as a result, Jarno's gone horribly wide of the apex of Brooklands. I cannot reiterate how distracting it is when you have cars all over the shop on your qualifying lap. Jarno seems to be holding it together admirably. Through Woodcut and then up to Copse. Let's see if he can keep it flat. In the Renault, a slight lift, but he hits the apex a little better than the others have. Again, he passes more traffic. That is actually his teammate who's up in P4 actually now. And there's actually a Mercedes who stuck it up in P3. Wow, it's all changed in the final few moments of this qualifying session. Let's ride on board though with Jarno, who now finds himself down in P7. He is dropping like a stone. He's really got to produce on this final lap. Otherwise, he is going to have major issues for the race. That could have huge ramifications for his final result. We have yellow flags out in sectors 2 and 3. He's very wide at Stowe as well. That might mean he doesn't quite have enough to challenge for pole. And I think he might have, has he backed out of it? No, he's just using 4th gear for the final chicane. What a strange technique that was. Up to the line. Jarno goes P2 out of nowhere. He has somehow pulled an incredible lap out of the bag. That was really quite something. I'm not sure given the circumstances he did that lap in, I'm not sure I have ever seen a lap quite like that. The traffic that he had to contend with there, the pressure he had to contend with there, to stick it in P2, only 3 thousandths of a second off pole, really is quite something. Full credit to Jarno for that. The drivers he has beaten and the circumstances he's beaten them in, that is really quite something. So it looks like that will then be your final grid. Michael on pole for what I believe might be the first time this season, ahead of Jarno in P2, Vijay Lucas just behind them in P3, and then Nicolas Matteo in P4. Very strong qualifying from the Mercedes driver. Ahead of Tiro Stitz, live championship leader in P5. Ruben in the Ferrari in P6. Ahead of Roy, Hugo, Danny MG, our winner last time out. And then Hugo and somebody else who I didn't quite catch rounding out the top 10. I'll run you through your complete qualifying results in just a moment. So there are your confirmed qualifying results then. What a qualifying session we were treated to. Jim Michael set an early lap time in that session, but that was good enough for pole with a 125.197 by a mere 3 thousandths of a second from Jarno Otmar, who finds himself in P2 for this British Grand Prix, ahead of Vijay Lucas in P3, with Nicolas Matteo a strong result in P4, ahead of Tiro Stitzel in P5, Ruben in P6, a strong qualifying from the Ferrari driver, only 2 tenths off pole, with Roy, Hugo, Danny MG and Lee Finley rounding out the top 10. Then Clarkey, Alvaro Aznar, Sean, Demon, Casper, Kiski, Alex, Stay Frosty and Davidos rounding out the grid. But those times were absolutely unreal, and there's been quite a reaction in the chat as well. A 25-1 is just frankly unbelievable. So to have 2 drivers down at that level, and then to have almost everybody else within 2 tenths in the top 10 is quite incredible. That just shows how fast and competitive this league has become. It's come a long way since it was probably considered the slowest league in AOR. Now it's probably being considered up there on par with all the other 3 platforms as equal fastest, which is, yeah, quite a journey it's been on. It's also, I think, in my humble, unbiased opinion, of course, the most entertaining league. I think Season 16 was probably the best season of league racing I have ever watched. Not just in this league, ever. It was just unreal. The title fight was amazing, and every single race was filled with drama. It was, yeah, quite amazing. If this 10-race season can come anywhere near matching that, then we really will be in for a fantastic season. So, for a dry race then, we are underway for the formation lap. Let's see what tyres everybody has gone for outside of the top 10 then. So pretty much everybody's gone with the softs, and then P15 to 20 are going for the mediums, which is certainly going to make things a little bit interesting. Clarkey and Alvaro Aznar are actually also going for the medium compound tyres, and they may well become moving roadblocks as we get towards the end of the first stint of this race. With all the front runners pit from their soft compound tyres for the mediums, they are certainly going to come out in quite a lot of traffic, judging by that. Only 2 cars outside the top 10 going for the softs, which might well show that the alternate strategy might be the best. We are expecting, though, everybody to be on pretty much the same strategy. If you're starting on the softs, you're going to want to do a 1-stop, because the pit lane around this track is the longest thing I've ever seen in my life. And soft medium should get you comfortably to the end from about lap 9, maybe a little before, maybe a little after. You've got a little bit of margin to play with, but the medium should last pretty long and take you pretty easily to the end of the race, you would assume. Something else to note around this track actually is that the slipstream and the DRS is incredibly strong. We are likely to encounter some pretty significant slipstream trains as we move later on into this race. I imagine it will be very difficult for the field to split, and hanging on to the DRS and slipstream of the car in front could be the deciding factor in whether you get a good result or not in this race, as Michael slowly makes his way around the lap then, warming up his tyres and backing up the entire field as the tension builds then. 26 laps of the British Grand Prix await us. A full grid of 20 cars actually, and I'm sure plenty of action waiting to unfold. So our reigning champion Jim Michael will start from pole position, and then the man currently sat in P3 in this championship, the Renault driver Jarno Otmar, pulls into his grid slot for P2. The inside for turn 1 can certainly be an interesting proposition. You've got to be very, very careful because it's such a high-speed corner. Plenty of action can happen, I think that's for sure. So, We're waiting then for everybody to line up into their grid slots. The last few cars are just moving into position now as TUF Max lines up in his grid slot in P20. So here we go then, on board with Jim Michael. 26 laps of the British Grand Prix await us. The 5 red lights are now on. We are ready to go racing at Silverstone. We have 5 red lights. And away we go. Let's see if Michael can maintain the lead into turn 1. He's got a fantastic start. He's already ahead of Jarno, who's already under pressure from Lucas going into turn 1. There is contact. The Renault is sideways. I think Lucas has lost out on all of that as Jarno maintains P2. Schnitzel up into P3. Lucas trying to fight with Schnitzel into turn 3. Let's see if he can make that move stick. They are still side by side. There look to be some pretty significant contact between Lucas and Jarno as they go through turns 3 and 4. It looks like Lucas has just about maintained P3. That was very, very scary stuff. Jarno seems to be going sideways into turn 1. A perfect start from Michael as he maintains the lead of this race by a long way. Schnitzel having to go defensive into Brooklands from the Mercedes of Nicolas Matteo, who finds himself down 1 position from the start. They continue to go side by side through Luffield. Schnitzel on the outside. The championship leader has lost out again, and he might lose out another position to Ruben as they go side by side through Woodcut, and they look like they're going to be side by side into Copse as well. Matteo gives the Ferrari slipstream, and I think Schnitzel's going to lose another position. He is round the outside at Copse. He cannot hang on, and he finds himself now down in P6. He has dropped a position, is now under all kinds of pressure from Jim Roy just behind. So it is Michael who leads us through the middle sector on lap 1 ahead of Jarno and Lucas in P3. What a dramatic start that was. Jarno just about hanging on to P2 under all kinds of pressure from the cars behind. Michael serenely in front, 6/10 between him and P2, looking very safe up there as Schnitzel now already applying the pressure, trying to make a move and get himself further up the field. He's down in P6 for the championship leader. He is losing points here. I think he might even lose the championship lead to Lucas if things stayed as they are. So as we come to start lap 2, Michael sets the fastest lap of this race and maintains the lead by 7/10 ahead of Jarno Otmar. We're riding on board with Tiro Schnitzel. Dominic Hoffman as he looks to make a move on the Ferrari of Ruben VG into turn 4. Oh, he dummies down the inside. Ruben goes very, very wide. That was enough to put him off. And I think now Schnitzel could be looking down the inside into Brooklands if he can get a good enough exit out of the loop, which he cannot quite. So he has to settle for P6 for now, as that's a very scary moment for Ruben as he almost dropped a position there, being psychologically beaten into turn 3 almost. The stuff of an experienced driver that was for Tiro Schnitzel. So let's ride on board with VGI Lucas, the man currently in P3 in this race. There's 6/10 between him and Jarno in front. It looked like the two of them made contact into turn 1, which could have ended very, very nastily. Thankfully, they both got away with it unscathed, which, well, it looked like it might not happen like that at one point. And then Lucas fought for his position brilliantly with Schnitzel through turns 3 and 4, and then in the end that cost the Renault driver and his championship rival a lot of positions, and he now finds himself down in P6. Can he get past Ruben here though? No DRS at this point in the race. He's looking though to try and get past that Ferrari into Stowe on lap 2. Let's see if he can already start making his way through the field, and he does. Down the inside of Ruben, and the Ferrari doesn't really put up too much opposition whatsoever. Is he going to look down the inside into the chicane? Yes, he is, but Schnitzel's able to brake late enough to maintain the position. So he moves himself back up into P5, and the recovery continues as Michael once again sets the fastest lap of this race. He's driving away from the rest of the field. That gap is 0.8 of a second now, and if he can put in a decent lap here, he might well be able to break the DRS, which could be the crucial factor in this race. So as everything's starting to settle down, we are pretty much as you were off the line after a little bit of battling early on. The positions are pretty much as we qualified in, although Ruben looks like he's about to lose another position here to Roy as they get sideways and make contact on the straight, and Danny MG is able to take advantage. Our winner from last time out in Austria takes advantage of the contact on the straight and moves up into P7. That was a bizarre moment between Roy and Ruben. It cost them both a huge amount of time and cost Roy a position to Danny, who now looks like he's set to challenge Ruben for P6. They still haven't quite dropped out of DRS range of the cars in front, so they're all right for now, but that was quite a scary moment. I'm surprised that didn't end worse than it did. So let's ride on board with VGI Lucas through Maggots and Beckett's. He will have DRS for the first time. Again, he runs slightly wide. Everybody seems to like running slightly wide onto the grass there. It really doesn't have a detrimental effect on your lap time whatsoever, which maybe it should do considering you're running on the grass, but regardless, let's ride back on board with Ruben, who's under all kinds of pressure from Danny, who's going to gain 2 positions in a single lap here. Danny trying to fight back into the final chicane, and he cannot quite do it. So S2V Danny moves up into P6 in this race, making up 2 positions in the space of 1 lap. Getting past the Ferrari of Ruben and the Williams of Roy as well. Very smart driving from the Mercedes driver. As this battle up at the front is becoming ever more interesting here. Let's stay on board with the Ferrari in case he goes for a move. No, not quite. Let's go and find Jarno Ottmer, seeing as he just set the fastest lap of this race. That gap is now down to 0.6 of a second, but still way too far back to even think about going for a move. So we'll have to sit behind for now. He's still though, lap 4 of 26, he's got plenty of time to consider his move. That gap is now half a second. Michael looking imperious early on in this race, but unable to break out of DRS range before it was activated, and that could be crucial as we move later on into this Grand Prix. Lucas slightly further back from these two, but still very much in touch and well within DRS range as well, as the only gap that's really appeared is between P5 and P6. It looks like for the moment the top 5 is driving away from the rest of the field, with Tyrrell Schnitzel, Dominic Hoffman, our championship leader, at the very back of this train, as Ruben is under pressure from, or Danny even is under pressure from Ruben here, who has an enormous style as we go onto the hangar straight. And I think that's going to compromise the Ferrari to enough of an extent that he is not close enough to go for a move. And the battling between these three has cost them, well, cost them dearly, really. And the gap between P6 and P5 is now up to 2 seconds, which, given the context of this race and how strong the slipstream and the DRS effect is, that could be absolutely huge as we move later on into this Grand Prix. As both Renaults set consecutive fastest laps, they are the fastest cars on track. Once again, as we've seen so many times this season, they seem to have huge amounts of pace, and Jarno really is now applying the pressure to Jim Michael in front of him. Michael perhaps just psychologically feeling the need to go defensive into Brooklands and move offline to try and break that slipstream, which is so strong and makes such a difference, but it hasn't helped him in the slightest, and that gap is now down to just under 0.3 of a second as Ruben and Roy are fighting it out once again. It looks like Roy is going to try and hang around the outside. At Luffield, he's got a cutback line. Ruben cuts him off very nicely, but he won't be able to stop him getting down the inside into Copse, and that could be the final straw for Roy. The inside for Copse is the be-all and end-all, really. You cannot go around the outside there, and Roy just about manages to reclaim P7 as the two Ferraris now are nose to tail with Sean and Ruben very, very close together. Sean has come out of nowhere, really. Looks like a very strong start to this race for the second Ferrari driver, who now finds himself in the points here, looking to make a move on his teammate. But while all this is going on, the two leaders are becoming very, very close as well. That gap between the two of them is a mere 0.2 of a second, and Jarno really is starting to turn it on here. And Michael, within a few laps, could find himself vulnerable to an attack from the Renault driver, as Nicolas Matteo, who's having such a strong race up in P4 for Mercedes, picks up a 3-second time penalty, which, given how close the field is, particularly in the top 5, could have huge ramifications for the end of this race, though we'll wait and see whether that has a major difference or not. As Clarky in the chat saying he is done with the game, I don't blame you. He is 40 seconds off the back of the field, which has got to be a very, very painful experience. Back at the front though, and Michael's pace is holding firm, really. That gap actually extended a little bit despite the help of DRS. Jarno struggled slightly through sector 1. They've now dropped to 0.6 of a second behind Michael, which is actually quite a big distance considering he was only 0.2 back as we started this lap. The dirty air does have a pretty big effect when you're going through high-speed corners. Admittedly, it's not huge on this game, but it does still have a tangible difference, and you certainly feel it. And you can certainly see it when you're watching as well, as Michael has a bit of a slide through Magnus and Beckett, which is going to compromise him down the hangar straight. It looks very, very slidey as we go into the hangar straight, actually. Jarno, though, opting to turn his ERS completely off, which is a bold call, so he's not going to be gaining much at all down this straight whatsoever. Just saving his battery, and he's got considerably more battery to use than the Williams driver. He is fighting for the lead here, so Jarno just being very tactical, biding his time. He knows he's still got plenty of time left in this Grand Prix. We're about to start lap 7 of 26 here, so there's no rush for the Renault driver, and it looks like for the moment he has absolutely everything under control. Let's look a little further back then, as Lucas is just behind these two as well, and he's still very much in touch with these two, and in fact he's closed up slightly in the last few laps. Where Jarno's been caught right behind the Williams, it looks like Lucas has been able to close the gap slightly, and he now finds himself only half a second behind these two, who are moving all over the place on the straight as Alex retires from the session and Red Bull's nightmare weekend continues. One of them is 40 seconds off the back and the other's out of the race, only 7 laps into this Grand Prix. Those two drivers have so much experience between them, and unfortunately neither of them are having a particularly good season. Clarkey with only a handful of points, and Alex, one of the 4 drivers in this league to have not scored a single point 5 races in, which is certainly going to hurt. Remember, he was a man that used to fight for titles. Oh, how the once mighty have fallen. So back to this battle for the lead then, and Jarno is putting Michael under all kinds of pressure. He's pretty much on par with his best lap of this race so far. Again though, he isn't turning up his ERS even remotely. He's leaving it completely off and just being very, very tactical. He's happy to let Michael do all the work while he sits behind in the slipstream and the DRS and saves his fuel and saves his battery, which is a bold call, but one that seems to be working at the moment. It does, however, place an awful lot of faith in the fact that he believes in his own ability to get past when it really matters and not take the opportunities when they're there, like they are at this point in the race, which is bold. Still, though, you have to respect that strategy. Schnitzel now is right behind the Mercedes, who we saw pick up a penalty earlier in the race, and the top 5 are very much together here. But Schnitzel, if he wants to have any kind of impact on his championship rivals, has to get a move on very quickly, as Matteo is very, very slow out of the loop, and that could be the final nail in the coffin in his fight for P4 into Brooklands, and he's already behind by the time we get into the braking zone. And Tyrrell Schnitzel moves up into P4 and his recovery continues. He found himself down in P6 on the opening lap, and he's slowly making his way through the field, and he's now only a second back from the leaders as he drifts out of Luffield in the gravel slightly, which could have ended very, very nastily, but thankfully for him he is still well within a second of that top 3 as these 3 look set to battle. That gap is only 0.3 of a second between Jarno and Michael. If Jarno can nail this high-speed section of corners, he could have a chance into Stowe. This is certainly the closest I remember seeing him. So as we go onto the hanger straight, he activates his DRS. Is he going to go for it this time? Yes, he is. He turns his ERS into overtake mode. Surely he's got to be close enough this time. No, he turns his ERS down again and decides against going for a move into Stowe. That gap between them is only just over 1/10 of a second. Jarno really is piling on the pressure at this stage of the race, but still he cannot do anything about challenging Michael for the lead at this stage anyway. So we're about to start lap 9 of 26 here as Danny picks up a 5-second stop and go penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So he's the first of the top runners to blink really in pit very, very early, which is a big call that might well trigger some reactions who will not know he's picked up a 5-second penalty for that. So I imagine we'll probably be seeing people coming to the pits either this lap or the next, and this could have huge ramifications in the battle for the lead as they're all well within a second of one another. Still though, none of them quite close enough to go for a move on each other as this top 5 train is quickly becoming a top 4 train as Jarno is so close to the back of Michael through Brooklands and Luffield, and these 4 who provided us with so much entertainment on this game in this league look set to scrap it out once again, and we could have one hell of a British Grand Prix on our hands here if this kicks off in the next few laps. Let's see though if Jarno is going to go for a bold corner pit and try and undercut Michael. Michael usually stays out a little longer than you would expect him to. He's not fond of going for an undercut. He tends to like having less worn tyres at the end of the race and using that to his advantage, which is an interesting call. And let's see if he opts for the same thing on this occasion. That gap between him and Jarno is plenty wide enough for him to be able to stay ahead into Stowe. I think Jarno though might be coming into the pits on this lap. Let's see, what is Michael going to do? What is Jarno going to do? What are the rest of them going to do? And Michael pits. Jarno stays out. Lucas stays out. And Schnitzel stays out as well. So Michael, the only one of this top 4 train to come into the pits, which could be crucial. The medium tyres do take one hell of a long time to heat up. So the undercut doesn't necessarily always work. If these guys can nail their in-lap on the soft compound tyres, they could well find themselves in the lead of this race. Let's see how this pans out then. 2 Renaults and a McLaren. They really cannot afford to scrap though. And these 2 Renaults as well, they haven't played it particularly well because only one of them can pit on the next lap. Otherwise, they are really going to struggle with double stacking, which would be a bit of a bizarre call, and they will severely hinder one another. And you would think as the driver behind in this situation, it falls on Tyrrell Schnitzel that even though he is the championship leader, it would fall on his shoulders to be the one to pit a lap later and go for the slightly compromised strategy. He is though all over the back of VJ Lucas. Is he going to go for a move into Cops? No, he's not. He backs out of it and turns down his ERS. He has no interest in taking that risk. He's very wide though on the exit. And I think actually Lucas is incredibly close to Jarno as well. Again though, he's got his ERS turned completely down. Let's see though if he launches an attack on this occasion. Lap 10 of 26, we're expecting these guys to come into the pits anytime soon as Roy picks up a 3-second time penalty. He is the next car on track to these guys. He is not though close enough to go for any kind of move as these three are still locked together. Let's see though, surely Jarno is going to come into the pits. Yes, he is, and Lucas follows him in as well. So let's go and find Michael and see if he can get anywhere near these guys. Pitting a lap earlier on the medium tyres is a bold call. It does take a little while for them to get heat into them. It does take a little while for their performance to get up to the same standard as the softs. Let's see though if he can maintain the lead that he had when he pitted. So coming through the final sector, the other two are still in the pit lane. If they've had clean pit stops, it's going to be incredibly close. Remember, Michael was only just ahead of both Jarno and Lucas. Michael though does seem to have had clear air on this outlap, which could be the crucial factor in deciding whether he stays ahead. So as we start lap 11 of 26 of this British Grand Prix, is Michael going to maintain his net lead of the race? Where is Jarno and where is Lucas? So through turn 3, they're side by side, and Michael actually is just about going to maintain that, but Jarno is only just behind him. Just by the skin of his teeth, Michael hangs on to the net lead of this race, and Lucas actually has had a bit of a slower pit stop, and he now finds himself out of DRS range of Jarno, which could be crucial. I'd be interested to see what happened there with Lucas, because he has dropped back an awful lot more than I would have expected him to. And I think at the moment, given how close Jarno got, you would imagine that the undercut, I don't know, it's a bit of an interesting one. He didn't seem to gain or lose much time at all, though you can see the impact of the cold medium tyres. He drifted out of left field, and actually, crucially, that's dropped him out of DRS range as well, and that might well drop him behind his teammate, which I'm sure is not what he wants whatsoever. And Schnitzel surely is going to be the one to pit on this lap. And given that these guys don't seem to have been going that fast, he could well find himself in a very good position here. Lucas had a very slow pit stop for whatever reason. Lost a lot of time in the pit lane. Jarno's just made that mistake on his outlap through left field driving in the gravel. And yes, Schnitzel does indeed come into the pit lane. You'd imagine he would be behind Michael, but probably ahead of Jarno based on what we've seen so far on this outlap, as Lucas really seems to be struggling. Look at that, he's under all kinds of pressure from Nicolas Matteo. That gap is only a mere 0.2 of a second, but let's stay on board with Jarno then as he starts lap 12 of this British Grand Prix through turn 1. Where is his teammate? And he's behind him, comfortably behind him. Look at that, that gap is half a second, and Schnitzel, who stayed up for 2 extra laps after seeing Michael come in, has worked that to perfection and has jumped his teammate. He's all out of shape though on the exit, and that might allow Jarno to have a go into Brooklands. The 2 Renault teammates are going to be going side by side into Brooklands, or not, as Jarno breezes past before we even get into the braking zone, and he will be able to make the most of his warmer tyres, and that could be a huge moment in this race, as it looked like Schnitzel had worked it perfectly, but then backed out of it into Brooklands and decided against racing his teammate on cold tyres, which would certainly have hampered both of them. But the big winner out of all of that is Jim Michael, who is 1.7 seconds ahead of Jarno. He has extended that gap massively and is looking imperious thus far in this race. Let's go back to Nicolas Matteo, actually, who is still piling on the pressure onto VGI Lucas, who's working his way back into contention in this race after another pit lane misdemeanor. Not quite on the scale of what happened at Suzuka last season, but still I'm sure that'll be equally frustrating for him, as he's 1.2 seconds back from TRS Schnitzel, and he will not have DRS from a car in front when he's trying to close that gap, which I'm sure for him will be incredibly frustrating. He's got both of those 2 runners in front of him, and he really does have to close that gap as quickly as possible if he wants to be a factor in battling for the lead of this race, as we just about move past the halfway point in this British Grand Prix. And what a race we've had so far. Actually not too much side-by-side action, but it really is an enthralling contest, as it is balanced on a knife edge here. Any one of these 4, maybe even 5 cars could still potentially win this race, depending on how this final stint pans out. For the moment, Michael still finds himself in clear air. He's got just over 5 seconds between him and Davidos, who is the first car running the medium tyres, who has yet to pit. So for now, he looks to be alright, and I imagine actually he might not even catch up to that train before they pit, so he might be alright. He might have clear air between now and the end of this race even, if he manages to maintain that 1.5 second gap to those 2 Renaults behind, who well, as you would expect, are very, very fast at this point in this race. Schnitzel actually unable to really close that gap to Jarno. Remember, he was ahead of him when he came out of the pits, and then he lost the position into turn 4, or Brooklands even. And is now a second back. He's not even in DRS range, and that could really hurt him if Lucas gets onto the back of him. But Lucas himself is being absolutely hounded by Nicolas Matteo in that Mercedes, who is piling on the pressure. With the DRS, he hasn't quite been able to go for a move as of yet, but I'm sure that pressure really is hurting Lucas's lap time. It is incredibly distracting and incredibly disconcerting when you have a car directly behind you. Is he going to go for a move? Oh, he's incredibly close to the back of that McLaren. That could have ended very badly. And by luck more than anything else, he manages to avoid losing his front wing, which would have been, well, the end of a good result in this race for him. And unfortunately for him, though, he's just too far back to go for a move into Brooklands. He'll have to sit back for now and probably try and set it up for a move into Stowe. Once again, Lucas loses even more time to those two Renaults. And Schnitzel seems to have found a little bit of pace now, and he's got himself back within DRS range of Jarno directly in front of him. Michael really is closing that gap to Davidos very, very quickly. It's now under 4 seconds. So if Davidos stays out much longer, he will have our net race leader on the back of him. Oh dear, oh dear. Vijay Lucas picks up a 3-second corner cutting penalty yet again. And that really is going to hurt him. Matteo also has one. But still, for Lucas, that is going to really hurt him in the fight for the lead of this race. And this is also going to hurt him in the fight for the lead of this race, as Matteo looks down the inside into Stowe, and that is enough for him to move up into what is a net P4. And the Mercedes driver has all kinds of pace on this medium compound tyre. It is too much for Lucas to handle. And well, Lucas' race goes from bad to worse, really. It was looking so good for him early on, but unfortunately it hasn't quite come to him. He lost pace in the pit stop phase, and now on the medium compound tyres he doesn't seem to have the pace to compete with the Renault drivers or Michael, and he's been overtaken by the Mercedes as well, as Schnitzel set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix, and he really has turned it on. He's now piling on the pressure onto his teammate out of nowhere, really. He was so far behind, rolling around outside of DRS range, and now he finds himself right on the back of his teammate, who is a title contender, really. The two of them are certainly fighting one another for the title, although of course they are working together in the team's championship as well. But the gap between them at the moment is 28 points in the championship, with Jarno 28 points behind his championship leader of a teammate. So you imagine Jarno will be very, very keen to stop that gap from extending any more, because, well, an almost 30-point gap in a 10-race season is an awful lot. So if Jarno wants to have a shot at winning this title, he's got to start taking the fight to his teammate at some point, and taking points off his teammate at some point. And this is as good an opportunity as any to do just that, as again Schnitzel turns down his ERS, and Matteo actually moves back ahead of Lucas. So I assume they must have swapped positions at another point in that lap as well, and the scrap between these two is really costing them an awful lot of time. The gap between them and the two Renaults is now 2.5 seconds. So Lucas's race, unless he can get past that Mercedes and stay past that Mercedes and then find some pace, is really, really being damaged here. The man who's only 7 points off the championship lead looks like he's certainly going to be a few more than 7 points off the lead come the end of this race. Remember, he's fighting for the title with Schnitzel. Oh, as the Mercedes goes very, very wide, is Lucas going to look down the inside into the loop? No. He goes for the outside line, tries to maximise his traction out of the corner. Surely he's got to go for it into Brooklands here. You will have the inside line. There is nothing the Mercedes driver can do about this one, surely. Into Brooklands they go, and Lucas is already ahead before they even get into the braking zone. And this battle looks set to continue for a long time yet. Another battle that looks set to continue for a long time yet is the battle between these two Renaults. And you can see Schnitzel all over the back of his teammate. They are as well slowly closing up on Jim Michael, the net race leader here, as the medium runners who've been on the mediums since the start of this race are starting to pit, so they will not encounter any traffic. It will be a straight fight between these three cars for the victory, with the 10 laps remaining in this Grand Prix. Again though, Schnitzel opting not to use any ERS as he goes into Stowe. Happy to sit behind his teammate for now and allow him to do the work, and not risk going for an overtake at this stage of the race. None of this provisional top 3 have any penalties as far as I am aware. As that gap between Jarno and Michael gets ever smaller. It's now only 1.1 seconds as the top 3 pit, promoting these 3 into their net position. So this is then your real top 3 in the race. Michael, Jarno and Schnitzel will fight it out for the lead of this race between now and the end of the Grand Prix. This could be quite something. That gap between Schnitzel and his teammate is a mere 0.3 of a second. That might well be enough actually to go for a move into Brooklyn. He's got his ERS in overtake mode, but he dummies to the inside and decides against going for a move, which is probably a sensible thing to do in that scenario. Still though, he's right on his tail through Lovefield and may well be close enough as we go into Stowe and come towards the end of lap 17. These two do have to be careful they don't lose too much time to Michael. That gap has gone up ever so slightly, so Jarno's lap isn't quite coming together perhaps as well as he would have liked. And Schnitzel might think here in this situation that to have a chance of winning this race, he's got to be the lead Renault in this train. Otherwise, it doesn't quite look like Jarno has the pace to break that DRS barrier and get right onto the back of Michael, whereas Schnitzel is harrying his teammate like no tomorrow, and he does seem to be the quicker of the two at this point, although he hasn't quite been able to find a way through as of yet. He doesn't seem particularly committed to trying to find a way through either. He has got pretty much full battery. Oh my days, look how much Jarno's got, and then look how much his teammate's got. Schnitzel has almost 100% battery charge. That is well set for the end of this race, certainly. And he's the one on the freshest tyres of anybody in this train as well. If you remember, he pitted after both of these two, and significantly after both of these two as well. He has 2 lap fresher tyres than Michael, and 1 lap fresher than his teammate, as the gap between Jarno and Michael is just on the bubble of DRS range. Jarno can smell the DRS there. He's not even 1.1 behind. And there we go, he's finally cracked it, and it looks like by the time we get to the next detection point, if Jarno can continue this pace, he should have DRS in this race. There's a scrap going on right down here outside of the point. They haven't really given these guys much attention. Lee Finlay is fighting out for with Davidos for P15, and this race is Kieski and Casper as well are fighting it out for P12, and Casper works his way up into P12 there in the Haas. Not quite as good a showing as we've seen from the Haas team so far this season, down both of them outside the points actually, which will be a little disappointing for them, but they've got plenty of time to rectify things. As surely this could be the moment for Schnitzel. That gap is 0.2 of a second. Is he going to look down the inside of his teammate into Stowe? Yes, he is. Is Jarno going to do anything to try and fight it? It looks like he doesn't have a choice here. Into the Vale chicane. Let's see if he goes back down the inside. No, he doesn't. And Schnitzel moves up into P2 in this race, and he is now free to chase down Jim Michael for the victory here. The championship leader has his sights set on the reigning champion, and the swap has finally happened between those two Renaults. It's looked like it's going to happen for lap after lap. Schnitzel has been all over the back of his teammate, and at long last is able to get past, and did it in a way, crucially, that didn't cost him that much time. The gap between him and Michael is only 1.3 seconds. I imagine that will only come down between now and the end of this race. You have to say that is disappointing for Jarno. He's looked so strong, and he nailed that qualifying lap. Remember, it feels like so long ago now, but we watched him on board with his entire qualifying lap. He was struck with traffic almost the entire way round. It looked like his lap wasn't coming together at all, and then out of nowhere he pulls out a 25-1 with a stunning final sector. Although that seems like a very, very long time ago now, as he finds himself in P3 behind his teammate, who started down in P5 and had an eventful lap 1 all the way down in P6. He's fought his way through brilliantly, and you have to say, to be able to, if he does end up winning from P5, that would be one hell of a result. So with 7 laps remaining, let me know in the chat who you think your driver of the day has been thus far, and who you believe has the best shot at winning this race as we move into the final stages of what has been a fantastic British Grand Prix. There is still plenty to fight for. Nicholas Matteo is designed to stay behind VGI and Lucas despite having a huge amount of overspeed into Stowe. Remember, both of these two have a 3-second time penalty, so they will not be fighting for the lead of this race. They also find themselves 4 seconds back from that top 3 train, so they are well out of contention here. The two Renaults and Jim Michael have been in a class of their own up until this point, and that looks set to remain the case for the rest of this Grand Prix. I think this is now a perfect time to reference what we saw in Season 13. Who remembers the last time we had 3 cars fighting it out for the lead of the British Grand Prix on the final lap? Yeah, I certainly remember it, that's for sure. I imagine though these guys are probably not going to take as many risks as we did on that day. And I would like to see them all finish it cleanly, that's for sure. I would, however, like to see some actual side-by-side racing. As good as this race has been and as tense as it has been all the way through, we haven't actually had that much side-by-side battling between these top three protagonists in the battle for the lead. You can see Schnitzel is just on the edge of DRS range. I think he's just going to miss out on getting it down the hangar straight. He will though pick up a distant toe, which might be enough for him to get it down the start-finish straight on that extra third DRS zone that was added especially for this year, which is, well, slightly pointless, I'm not going to lie, but it still makes a little bit of a difference. And there you go, it's 9/10 of a second. He's right on the bubble here. Let's watch and see if he gets it. He needs to have a perfect run through the final chicane. Oh, he's right on the edge. 19 thousandths away, and he doesn't have DRS. Surely, if he nails this first sector, he will have it as we go into Brooklands. Yeah, that gap is just over 8/10 of a second now. And the top three is coming together. There's a bit of a Constantina effect here. Everybody is coming together to scrap it out for the lead of this race in the last few laps. 5 laps remaining, and Schnitzel finally has DRS range, and he is dragging his teammate with him as well. That gap between Jarno and Lucas is almost 5 seconds, so these three are safe in the knowledge that it's just going to be the three of them fighting it out for the lead, unless something incredible happens in the closing moments of this race. So let's see how it shapes out then. Schnitzel closing that gap ever more. He's now using up some of that battery that he spent so long saving. Now that he's got a little bit of clear air. 6/10 of a second is that gap now. And again, Schnitzel's still running an overtaking ERS, but he is closing rapidly. Look at that. Michael is running very low on battery as well. He really is going to struggle if this scrap becomes even remotely prolonged. And I think Schnitzel really is in the box seat to try and take the victory here. The championship leader by 7 points could take the championship lead by even more here. His lead would, should he win this race, his lead would be almost 20 points, which would be huge given how few races are in this season. So that gap is now 4/10 of a second. There's a battle going on between Danny and Roy just behind, but let's stick with this battle for the lead as we start lap 22 of 26 of this British Grand Prix. Do not go anywhere, people. This battle is far from over just yet. Tyrrell Schnitzel's incredible drive in this race looks set to continue. Remember, he was down in P6 on lap 1. He is now fighting it out for P1 in the final few laps of this race. Let's see though, is he going to be tactical and sit behind Michael for a few laps and set it up for the final lap to make sure that Michael doesn't have an opportunity to overtake him back? That would be some serious next level thinking there. And he's certainly not going to go for a move into Brooklands on this lap. He sits behind through Brooklands and through Loughfield. He needs to maximise his exit here to make sure he's close enough once we finally make our way round back to Stowe. That DRS activation zone down the hangar straight is so long and you gain so much time. Surely this has got to be the moment for Tyrrell Schnitzel. And the race has been building up to this moment for lap after lap. Schnitzel had worked his strategy perfectly and he now finds himself right on the back of Jim Michael, who's surely going to struggle. Look how little battery he's got to fight with here. That could be the deciding factor in this battle. So, as we make our way onto the hangar straight for the 22nd time in this race, Schnitzel turns his ERS up into overtake and then straight back down to none. He is not interested in going for a move on this occasion. He is going to sit behind once again, as is his teammate. And for now, he is perfectly contented with sitting in P2 as Matteo and Lucas go side by side again through Stowe, and Lucas is now down in P5. The man who currently sits in P2 in this championship is not having a good race by his standards, it has to be said, as Matteo gets all under shape through the final corner, but manages to maintain the position. So, lap 23 then, let's see if Schnitzel is going to go for it on this occasion into Brooklands. Can he get a good enough exit out of the loop? Oh, he's very slidey, but as is Michael, he will have the DRS of course, and he is going to use overtake as well. No, he's not. He's still intent on saving his battery. I think he's very happy for Michael to do all the work, drag him away from his teammate, although he's certainly not out of the picture just yet. It looks like this battle is set to go right to the final lap, as Lucas again manages to get past Matteo, and that battle rages on and on. They're now 7 seconds behind the leaders. They must be having one hell of a scrap. But this battle for the lead continues to go on. Let's see how this shapes out then. So, Schnitzel now only 2.5 tenths of a second behind Jim Michael. Surely this has got to be his opportunity to go for an overtake into Stowe. Is he going to go for it on this occasion, or is he going to sit behind once again? Yes, he is. He is happy to sit behind once again. We're about to start lap 24, and Schnitzel has a distinct lack of urgency to go for a move. He's very, very confident in his own ability to go for an overtake when it really matters. He's had opportunities that if he wanted to get close enough, he probably could have done. He probably could have taken that risk. He is not willing to take it. The championship leader not taking any risk whatsoever at this point, really. He's happy to sit behind for now. And he's going to have to sit behind for another few laps, I would imagine. If he just sets it up for the final lap, then that would be the perfect thing to do tactically, because then Michael has no opportunity to go for an overtake back. But it does rely entirely on Schnitzel having an inch-perfect final lap, really, which puts a huge amount of pressure on both drivers. Michael again feigns to go defensive to the inside, but moves back to the outside for the racing line, and he's doing an incredibly good job to hold off this immense pressure from Tyrrell Schnitzel. Michael as well, something else to note, has got 2 lap older tyres than Schnitzel, so that tyre difference at this late point of the Grand Prix could make the difference, as Schnitzel this time looking to the outside for Copse. They are going to be going side by side, surely. Schnitzel though trying to back out of it. He's happy for Michael to look down the inside. Oh no, they make contact into the Copse. Oh, and that could be the defining moment in this race. It looked like Schnitzel was set to win the Grand Prix. He was in the perfect position, and he shed his front wing on the back of that Williams car. Michael going defensive, placing his car in all the right places. Schnitzel tried to launch around the outside, and it backfired hugely, and that could be the moment Schnitzel throws away the victory. Up until that point, he had worked everything perfectly. He was setting everything up beautifully for a final lap overtake, and he's thrown it away in one moment of misjudgment with wing damage, or what looked like wing damage. There was certainly carbon fibre all over the track, and I think that is going to cost Tyrrell Schnitzel a chance at victory as we start the penultimate lap of this British Grand Prix. Drama at the very last, and it's certainly not the end just yet, as now Jarno is the lead runner, and he is the one that's going to have an opportunity to overtake Michael. He didn't quite seem to have the pace of his teammate, but can he produce when it really matters? He has got to fly the flag for that Renault team if they want to take victory this evening. He currently sits P3 in the championship, and now this is a huge opportunity to try and regain some vital championship points from his teammate. He's currently 28 points behind Dominic Hoffman in the championship. At the moment, he's set to gain 3 of those back and make it a 25-point gap. But if he wins this race, it will be significantly less than that, and he would be about 18 points behind his teammate, which is a much smaller gap and much more manageable going into the second half of this season. Let's see if he can manage it as he drifts through Copse. He is really pushing these tyres to the absolute limit. He has 1 lap fresher tyres than Michael. There is, however, a ghost car going through Maggots and Beckers, and I think that might give Michael DRS. Let's see. It does, and that could be the Williams driver's saving grace there. That is incredibly lucky to pick up DRS off a disconnected car, and that could be the moment that potentially seals this victory for Michael. Is Jarno going to be close enough heading into the final lap of this Grand Prix? He's very, very wide on the exit of Stowe, and again, that might cost him. He's 4 tenths back. That is not close enough. He has to nail this first sector if he wants to have a chance in Michael going into Stowe. I think that DRS for Michael, though, might have just saved him. So, we start lap 26 of 26 of this British Grand Prix, the final lap, and this battle for the lead is going to go right to the death. Michael, for now, is holding off both of these 2 Renaults. Schnitzel, with that wing damage, surely is out of contention here unless these 2 crash. Let's see, though. That gap between Jarno and Michael is 4 tenths of a second. Can Jarno do anything to try and snatch victory right at the death here? Michael, again, feigns to go defensive into Brooklands. Moves back to the racing line. Cuts off the slipstream just for a moment. Jarno taking a very aggressive inside line. Michael just about hanging on for now. The gap is 2 tenths of a second, and he's drifted through left field as well. Surely that's going to compromise his exit down into Copse. Jarno trying to use up all the batteries that he's got left. Michael's almost got nothing to fight with. Michael going defensive into Copse. Jarno looking to the outside. Can he do what his teammate couldn't? He cuts back and he drifts and holds it just about opposite lock through Copse. Are they going to go side by side through Maggots and Beckers? Jarno looking to the inside, decides to think better of it. He's got a much better line though. Surely he is so close going onto the hanger straight. This is the moment. Michael all over the grass on the exit as we go down the hanger straight for the final time in this race. Jarno's surely got to look for the move here. Michael goes defensive, but it's not enough. Jarno finds his way to the inside for Stowe, and surely this is the moment to seal the race victory here. Michael, can he get back down to The final chicane, he looked back to the inside. Oh, there's contact. Michael loses his front wing. He's into the back of Jarno. That's going to cost him a position to Schnitzel. Jarno surely is going to take the victory here. Schnitzel's pushing him round the final corner. They are nose to tail across the line. Jarno Opmeer wins the British Grand Prix in the most dramatic of circumstances. And Schnitzel snapped his P2 right at the death. And it is a Renault 1-2 as Michael throws away the victory in the final few corners. Oh, and he will be cursing his move in that final chicane. He went for an aggressive dive to the inside, smashed into the back of Jarno, and that in the end is what has cost him. He couldn't prevent Jarno from going to the inside at Stowe, and he couldn't get back to the inside in time for the final chicane, and in the end, that is what is going to cost him. But what a race, what a final lap, and I have never seen a closer finish between three drivers than that in my life. What a race, what an unbelievable drive from all three of those drivers. Oh my goodness me, Michael will be cursing his luck though. He looked like he was set to win that race. He had everything under control and then he's thrown it away in the final few corners. Oh dear, this really is not shaping up to be his season whatsoever, but still, a podium is a strong result for him and he has to be happy with that, although, well, you got to say, he had the opportunity to win that, and if he could go back, I'm sure he would certainly manage that a little bit differently. But while all of that was going on, Lucas came home in P4. Again, that was incredibly close between him and the Mercedes of Nicholas Mateos. Look at all of those cars rolling round together. Wow, what a race. Again, this league produces one of the greatest races we have ever seen. And there you go. Your podium finishes. Jarno Opmeer wins once again, completing another Renault 1-2 ahead of Dominic Hoffman. He reclaims, well, 7 points in the championship. That gap between him and his teammate is now 21 points going into the second half of this season. And you have to say, he certainly deserved it based on the evidence of that final lap. Michael in P3, and yeah, he will certainly be cursing his move on that final lap. So, let's run you through the confirmed race results. And it was Jarno Opmeer who wins by 0.08 of a second from his teammate Tyrrell Schnitzel, by 0.1 of a second from Jim Michael in P3 in one of the greatest races this league has ever seen. Ahead of Vijay Lucas in P4, who loses yet more points in the championship. He is still in contention though. He didn't lose too many to Schnitzel, so going into the second half of the championship, he is still well in contention. Nicholas Mateo with a strong result for Mercedes in P5, ahead of Williams Jim Roy in P6. Ahead of Ruben and Danny, strong results for the pair of them in P7 and 8, ahead of Stay Frosty in P9 and Casper with the final point for the Haas team in P10. And outside the top 10 we had Sean, Kieski, Hugo, CRGA Demon, who is yet to score a point, Alvaro Asnar, Lee Finlay, I Davidos and Clarky Alex and TUF Max also yet to score points. But what a race. What an unbelievable race. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that. Well, on that note, I'm going to go and get a drink and lie down for a while. Thank you all very much for watching. Please do join us next week and for the remainder of the season for what is set to be an incredible run-in for this title. Make sure you go and tune into the Xbox and the PC races, which will have just started by now. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.